Delighted to welcome to the TheInformer studio a clinical psychologist from Melbourne. Her name is Sabina Read. Welcome.
Thank you, George.
We live in incredibly complex times, and adding to all the complexity, this thing called COVID-19. And I can imagine the stress that it's putting on people, on families, on children. There isn't anyone in the community that isn't struggling at the moment. What have you seen from the work that you do, and what can we take on board to help us navigate these troubled waters?
So I've actually seen the whole gamut of responses to COVID.
So complete compliance to I don't care about complying.
Well, you're talking about how are we doing the right thing or not, or
Yes.
are you talking about how we're feeling?
Yeah, about how we're feeling.
Because they're two different things.
Yeah. Let's cover the whole
Let's go the whole way.
Yeah.
So how we're feeling?
Yeah.
Some of us are feeling still optimistic and hopeful. I think many of us are feeling overwhelmed and uncertain and not sure what to do next. And I think particularly at this time, this juncture that we're at now, at least in Victoria, we thought that we were making progress and we were able to comply to a certain degree, and now we've had something taken away from us, and that's made it more challenging.
So a bit like kids, when you take something away from them, they make a bit of noise and they resent it.
And not just kids, because all humans, the research is really robust around this, that if we've been given something and then we've lost it, it hits so much harder than if we find something. So an example is if we lose $10, that hurts us more than the joy we get from finding $10. If we lose a job, that hurts and hits us harder than if we get a job. This is what the research tells us in general psychologically.
One of the struggles I've had is the messaging from day one. They meant well, and I'm talking about government and others. I was really disappointed by media because the initial reports, just as COVID hit us, was that it was something like the flu, which clearly it's not. We were told that it was going to affect those with compromised systems. That was a red flag for me, because when you start making exceptions, people's reactions respond very differently. And then they said to us, but if you're young and you're fit, you'll be fine. Again, another flare that was sent up that I thought was the wrong sort of message to hint or to send out, especially if you want the community to abide as one, which was always the call. Have you sensed that early messaging just mixed everything up?
I think there has been mixed messaging, and that's been in part because we're all discovering, we're all learning together. So even
we're discovering that we're a federation of states and not one place, all the same.
I'm thinking even on a global scale that the high level, the medical experts are still trying to navigate what is this, how fast does it spread, what impact does it have?
Well, it keeps morphing.
It keeps morphing.
Yeah,
so in part, I don't want to throw the message makers under the bus, because they're just distilling what's coming to them and trying to juggle at the same time, and it's a moving feast, really.
It is a moving feast, you're right.
As far as telling us mixed messages that this group in the population versus this group, or younger people, older people, what that does is psychologically, many of us have what's called an optimism bias.
Like confirmation bias, this is optimism bias.
Yes, so we think, this will be okay, it won't happen to me. So we exclude ourselves. And in many ways, this is great for our survival. Not during COVID, but in the real world, outside of COVID, an optimism bias can be very helpful and can be a very adaptive way to think of the world. But at the moment, if we're thinking, this is for other people, this is for people who only have a compromised immune system, or who only work in a certain sector, or only a certain age group, or whatever we think might be making them more at risk, means that we will then take risks and ignore the messaging that we're getting from the experts. So that's one reason why people don't comply. The other reason is probably something around we respond best to rewards. Early on in this story, in the COVID story, the reward was, or the perceived or anticipated reward, was that we wouldn't get sick. So we'll do the right thing and we'll comply, because the reward will be that we'll stay safe. Weeks go past, months go past.
But we were told September.
That's too much. That's too much to comprehend. That's like telling a toddler that Christmas is in December. that counts for nothing. Like, what's tomorrow? What's the next day? I can't wait.
The Pavlov's dog's training is standing up really firmly right now.
Everything we're talking about, George, is underpinned by psychological principles. Why we are behaving the way we are and behaving, positively not so well as well, not complying. It's all...
So what advice would you have? What's the sort of thinking we should be instilling in ourselves and others around us to help us on this journey? What are the sorts of things we should be saying? My mother, for example, lives in New South Wales, and she's wondering why I'm not going up to see her. I'm trying to say to her, Mum, she's 86, and I say to her, Mum, the government has asked us lockdown, not to travel interstate, and when does that mean? When can I see you?
Yes.
That's difficult, isn't it?
Yes, because what you're talking about is this mix between our individual needs and our individual thinking versus our collective thinking and needs. And there's this constant juggle for us, not just during COVID, but it's become really magnified at this time, to be thinking about what are my needs. So my need is to see my mum because she's elderly and she needs me. What's the collective need? Why am I any different if I go crossing the border or travelling? Then I'm contributing to the issue, to the challenge.
What do you say to government when it had an opportunity to call Mother's Day, okay, and then put the marker down the day after Mother's Day? But no, they put it the day before. So they denied so many people an opportunity to see Mum. Then they were denied Anzac Day, which was part of our national calendar.
Yes.
And a day of reverence, a day to reflect.
Yes.
So again, we're missing so many key markers that make up our year, our month, our week.
And not just our year, our month, our week, but our identity, our sense of belonging, our sense of connection, our history, our legacy.
So what do we do?
So all
Come
of those,
on, Doc, what do we do?
Well, those things are important. However, I'm kind of with the government on Mother's Day and Anzac Day because those are significant, yes, emotionally significant days on the calendar, but they're opportunities for thousands and thousands of people to get together. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We need to still stick to the facts because the facts are that when we are, recently we've been told that it's through families that is creating some of the greatest transmission. So although we're hardwired to be in tribes and we feel like when we're with our family, that must be a safe place to be because they're our peeps, that's not the case. No. That's not the case. So we're having this sort of tug of war internally, individually and collectively with how we're hardwired, what we desire and what we know, and what's happening to us at this time, which is in contrast to that.
And there's another added layer of complexity. People living 700 metres down the road now suddenly live in a different postcode.
Yes.
And they're being told, you can't do what I'm allowed to do.
Yes.
Which adds another layer of pain
does.
next.
That's one of the most challenging things to deal with. Literally on the border from, is it Brunswick West to Brunswick?
I'm not naming any names.
Well, but when the names of the suburbs are being listed,
and
it's so hard. I read this morning actually in today's news that people in big numbers are going to change their driver's license addresses because they want out. This is what we do when we feel like we're being pushed up against a wall. We think, how can I get out? How can I get out? Which is rule breaking. So we need to continue to think about the collective experience here. And actually a lot of growth and positivity can come from thinking, for the greater good of all of us, I will comply. The research tells us that when we're thinking about the greater good of the whole big wide world, it's too much. We can't relate to everyone.
Too grand a scale.
The scale's too big. So let me think about the greater good in my family. Then let me think about the greater good in my street. And then in my community and so on and the ripple effect will lead to hopefully what we want more of.
Sabina Read giving us an insight into some of the challenges that we're all facing. Please come back because we need to cover so much more territory.
Thank you, George. Love to.
Good on you.